Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Pro Soccer Talk. I'm your host, Joe Prince Wright. I'm stateside right now, guys. And as you can see, Nick Mandola, there he is. He's in Buffalo, New York, and Evans is in Kansas City. And gents, we are just getting used to not having each other's company in person because we've been hanging out up in Western New York recently. What a great time we had. We had the inaugural Pro Soccer Talk Golf Day, which was a roaring success. And Nick, how are you, my friend? Because it's been a busy summer. I'm glad we all got to get together, but there's so much going on. Transfer news, especially with the USMNT, which we're going to talk about a lot today. But how are you, mate?
Yeah. So after we golfed, we went to a little, I guess you'd call it a bottle shop in Buffalo, Orchard Park for that matter. And the Euros, who are the Netherlands playing that game? Whatever. I was watching it. I think within 30 seconds, I turned to you guys and I go, yeah, I'm ready. I'm really, really officially ready for club season to start. Because that was actually a great game, too. So it's been fun to have meaningful soccer on our TVs, and it was more fun to have you guys in Buffalo.
It was a good time, right, Andy? And I think Nick speaks to all of us there. We are ready for these preseason games to ramp up and get closer and closer towards the start of the Premier League season. And we're nearly there. It's really, really close right now. So almost final preparations, I feel like. A lot of managers are rolling through players. They kind of already have an inkling of their best starting 11. So how do you feel about that? And how do you feel about getting together? Because that was a good time in Buffalo, wasn't it?
Yeah, first things first, you guys showed me a lot of good times. A lot of good beers were had. Some semi-decent to average golf was played as well. So thank you guys for the hospitality in my first time up to Buffalo. Do recommend for anybody out there that's maybe on the fence, do I go to Buffalo? Just go to Buffalo. There's a lot of good stuff there. As for the season, yeah, the next 10 months are half of a Premier League season, a World Cup, and another half of a Premier League season. I am very, very ready. It's going to be intense. I think it's going to take a lot out of us. But this is, we had this conversation in Buffalo. This is a dream, what's about to happen over the next 10 months, covering the U.S. men's national team at a World Cup. We didn't get to do that 4 years ago when it was in Russia. So, this is something that I've been looking forward to for a long, long time. Let's get to it.
Very special indeed, this time coming up. And it's going to be a very special episode of Pro Soccer Talk today. So let's kick it off, boys. First big topic. Let's look bigger picture here. We've got some time now as we prepare for the new season. I want to focus on which players to keep an eye on this season. I'm thinking which Premier League players are under the radar, maybe set for a breakout, maybe sort of a comeback season for them. Because there's a lot of players coming in. Sophomore surge, if you want to call it that. A lot of players maybe came in last summer that really didn't get going in the Premier League at the new clubs. But Nick, who have you got your eye on? Because I know, be careful with this, because Premier League fantasy players out there will be listening intently and will take this as gospel. Whoever you say now is going to be in their fantasy lineup in week 1.
Yeah, I may stop short of gospel, but whatever that level is, you can take this, because I am a believer in the two biggest transfers maybe of last summer, not counting Ronaldo, really paying off. And that's Sancho for Manchester United and Grealish for Manchester City. I believe that Grealish's first season would have been a bit of a hit, because let's not forget Pep Guardiola, when he bought Grealish, who did he think he was also getting? Harry Kane. Instead, he gets Harry Kane with, like, I don't know what you want to call it, mutant juice flowing through his bones. Erling Haaland feasting on that service with your Silvas and your Fodens. I'm just super excited. I think Grealish and Sancho Grealish had a better season last year than we gave him credit for, because we were expecting so much. Sancho, it looks like, and again, these are just friendlies. It's very early, but even before he started succeeding, a second season back in England with a real coach, pretty exciting.
Andy, you agree with that? Any other players you want to highlight?
Yeah, Grealish is really the one for me, because I think it was our fault, not us specifically, but the greater our fault for having such immediate expectations for Grealish going to City. We should have known it was going to take time to learn the system and just acclimate himself to Pep's ways. And he said it, Pep said it leading up to the season, and everybody just seemed to ignore it. And it didn't make a ton of sense. Nick's right. He did have a better season than maybe some of the numbers say. But I think the key point is going to be, with Erling Haaland coming in, they're going to have to change the way that they play a little bit, because they're not going to have as much possession up top from the center forward position. It's going to be about getting the ball to him. And so I almost wonder if there's going to be some sort of, maybe not formational change, but philosophical at least, to where Jack Grealish is allowed to play a little bit more in the middle, maybe where he really, really thrived in a free role for Aston Villa, which obviously resulted in the $140 million transfer to Manchester City. And so, not having the center forward last season, we thought it was going to maybe hold them back from winning the title. They managed to just barely do it. Now they've got a center forward, and we can begin to see Pep evolve this team. And I do think Jack Grealish will be at the center of that, because you look at the money spent on him, you look at the age that he's at, the profile that he has. He is a player that I think, moving on from Kevin De Bruyne over the next 18 to 24 months, probably, I know it's hard to imagine doing, but they're going to have kind of the successor, or maybe the bridge to the long-term successor. And I think Grealish can be one of those players.
Wow, high praise there for Jack Grealish. As an Englishman, I'm very happy with that. And I'm very happy that Nick mentioned Jadon Sancho as well, because that means they'll be in good form heading towards the World Cup. But focusing on Man United, Nick, you mentioned there, Sancho's looked really good in pre-season, and these little snippets we've seen of them playing out in Asia and Australia. Diogo Dalot is low-key been probably their best player in the tour. He's been sensational down the right, whipping in great crosses. He's totally overtaken Aaron Wan-Bissaka as United's starting right back. And talk about a guy who's got a second chance there. Under Erik ten Hag, quite a technical player, likes to cut inside. He's been working really well with Bruno Fernandes down that one flank. And I'd love to see Sancho do well as well. I'm going to chuck another name in there. Not a sophomore surge by any stretch of the imagination, but a comeback player, Anthony Martial. He scored 3 goals already in Man United's pre-season. I personally think that they look a lot better without Ronaldo up top, as we've been saying time and time again. You can see it again. It's pre-season. Everyone in the comments, calm down. But that fluid kind of front four there of Sancho out wide, Rashford out wide, Martial up top, and then Bruno just dictating the tempo. And we haven't even mentioned Christian Eriksen as well coming at United. But there's a few players there at United that needed a clean slate and needed a fresh start. And they certainly have that. We haven't even mentioned Donny van de Beek or Harry Maguire or some of the other players there at United. But I think they're going to be a lot better, and just there's going to be a lot more positive atmosphere around that team this season. Looking elsewhere, Kai Havertz, I think similar to Martial, maybe given an opportunity, it seems like he's going to be the main man up top to win that number 9 spot. Lukaku's leaving. Ronaldo doesn't seem like he's going to go to Chelsea. It doesn't seem like Chelsea are going to buy another striker. They're going to rely on Werner, Pulisic, Sterling and others to kind of be the guys underneath a focal point. But I think that suits Havertz better. He can kind of just link up play, drop a bit deeper. And I think they've got players now that will definitely go beyond him. And he's got that license to sit back deeper. And I'm going to throw a couple other players out there. Marc Cucurella from Brighton, if he does end up going to Man City, watch out for him. I think he's got the potential to be sensational. I know you love the Seagulls, Nick. And Martin Odegaard. I mean, the end of last, there it is. There's the Seagulls. Martin Odegaard for Arsenal, I think he come on leaps and bounds at Arsenal. Still so young, we forget about how young he is. And in that team, I think he's going to have more and more responsibility. So, guys, looking at some of the new signings coming into the Premier League or moving clubs, Nick, anybody else that you really expect to have a breakout season, if you will? Because looking at Gabby Jesus, Jed Spence going to Tottenham, maybe Fabio Carvalho going to Liverpool. Anybody of those players or anybody else that you think is going to really make big strides forward this season in the Premier League?
Spence is interesting. I don't want to fall into the I don't want to say shades of Ryan Sessegnon, but I just don't want to put too many expectations on him because of where he was playing last season. And yes, he was outstanding. And of course, we've seen players make that jump before, but I think he's going to be fantastic. I also don't want to say he's going to be fantastic on week 1. I know this is a little bit goofy and a little bit homery, but I do like the Boatman signing for Newcastle, Sven Boatman at center back, because all of the moves they've made in the past few years have been to shore up kind of everywhere else in the past few year, I should say. And to have someone back there to be Jamal Lascelles on steroids, because he's kind of fallen off a cliff since he became Newcastle's captain. And to have that sturdy center back behind Bruno Guimaraes with Callum Wilson and St. Max up top. And obviously they've done some business at goalkeeper as well. I really do like that. And I'll be interested to follow them. Wolves, and we'll talk about this a lot over the next few weeks. There are some teams that I think under the radar, real sink or swim candidates.
Andy, do you agree with that? And what do you think about Some other players that we haven't mentioned yet set to have breakout seasons.
Finally, an opportunity to talk about Tottenham. Thank you, Joe. I really appreciate it. Spurs are doing great business alongside Arsenal, alongside United, as has already kind of been mentioned this week. But I think, whatever the fee for Richarlison, however you feel about that, I think you look at the way that he'll be used by Antonio Conte as a backup to Harry Kane in certain situations, as a backup to Son in certain situations, as a backup to Kulusevski in certain situations, and also just as a late game sub to either cause chaos at one end of the field or really try and close the game out defensively from that center forward position. I just think he's an incredible chess piece that Conte now has at his disposal, and he's the perfect manager to have a player like that. I think he's also an extension alongside Christian Romero, who those two have a little bit of previous with one another, are an extension of Conte on the field as well. The mentality and just the intensity that they're going to bring every single day. I think between those two and between the manager, the days of Tottenham being called soft or wilting under pressure, I think those are going to be gone. It's just the personalities that they have in there as well. You get a player with Premier League experience who's been through a lot of adversity. He had 2 different managers in his one season at Watford. He had 4 different managers at Everton in 4 seasons there. He has had 0 stability, and yet multiple clubs were interested at around $50 million this summer. I think that says a lot about him. Speaking of shopping in the Premier League, Yves Bissouma, a fan favorite around here, went from his time at Brighton the last few years. Another really good deal player that will fit in, will serve a role. It's not so much about signing a star for Spurs this summer. And so while on paper, they might be a little underwhelming in terms of the name or the stats or the production or what have you, the stars are in place. It's now about building a full squad around those players, giving Conte what he needs to get through the long haul of a 38-game league season, the Champions League, the Cups, and everything. We know it's a World Cup year. And also, Ivan Perisic might be a really, really sneaky, under the radar, just genius-looking signing. A lot of people don't know how good he was at his peak because he never played in the Premier League. He never got to one of those top clubs in the world. And now kind of a left wing back, Conte knows how to use him. He had him at Inter. He won Serie A with him. So I just think that whatever the workflow at Spurs, if it's Conte saying, get me this player or a player like this, and Fabio Paratici goes out and he just does it.
Look at it's not quite a sophomore surge, but go across North London and look at what Arsenal's done. They have a lot of young players. We've been talking about their young players for 2 seasons, so it's not a sophomore thing. But if they are adjusting, if Smith Rowe takes another step, if Saka, which is remarkable to think about, takes another step, Gabby Jesus now being in a position where he's the man. And I really like the idea. We'll see if it comes to fruition of the Zinchenko signing, because you have someone who can come in and you can tell him you're going to play your preferred position in midfield, which, by the way, the pieces around him of Partey, of Xhaka, of these other players that they'll get, now take all of that and say, oh, we're going to use you at left back, which we already know he can play at a Premier League winning level. So, man, the North London derbies are going to be phenomenal this year.
They are. And Nick, I love how quickly Andy has jumped on board the Tottenham bandwagon with us. He was a little bit unsure a few weeks ago, but now I'm pretty sure he thinks they're going to win the title, right, Andy?
Not quite. I think they're going to have a very good season, maybe a special season. Title that's a big gap to those two at the top, but massive progress forward for sure.
And not quite from Andy is a hell yes from anyone else. So we should probably
careful sitting on that fence, Andy. That is, it's going to be a good season for Tottenham, I think, with the summer business they have already done. Okay, let's focus now on the other teams. We talked a lot about the top 6 teams there, but there's been a lot of moves outside of the top 6 in the Premier League. I'm looking through some of the teams. I mean, Villa have brought in Boubacar Kamara from Marseille, great holding midfielder. Diego Carlos, great centre-back from Sevilla. Brentford have made some good sneaky moves as well, with Aaron Hickey and Keane Lewis-Potter coming in. Brighton as well, they're kind of just under the radar, right? They seem to unearth some gems. And looking down the list, James Tarkowski to Everton seems like a really good deal. Nick, I know you're a big fan of him.
Yep.
And Fulham as well, some decent signs there. Andreas Pereira from Manchester United, decent midfielder. But let's focus on Leeds United, because Brendan Aronson, obviously Tyler Adams coming in, and Luis Sinisterra from Feyenoord was really, really good in their run to the Europa Conference League and the final of that competition. And he seems to be the replacement for Rafinha. So who wants to go all in on Leeds United, Nick? I'm pretty sure it's going to be you, because they've sold 2 key players, but they spent big and some decent signings for them.
I'm not going to quite go with a come on Leeds, but I kind of want to. I really like the moves of the American players, but I want to put them aside because Sinistero, the underlying numbers with him are also very good. And when you have an electric type of player who also has the backing of the statisticians, these are usually a good sign. It's easy to forget because of his starring roles, that how young Ilian Melier is. If they can sort out the back, which is, Jesse Marsch did a little bit of it last year, I think they're going to be in a really good position. You had mentioned Villa. If I'm Leeds, I'm hoping to have maybe last year's Villa season. And if that happens, I'm very excited about taking the next step after that. I do wonder, right now, everybody's on board of Jesse Marsch, and I think they should be. And this isn't just me being American, but this is the instance where I start to worry what happens after these fun buys and they forget that they sold Rafinha and there's 3 losses in a row and one of them doesn't look good at all and he doesn't sub in the player that everybody wants. That'll be an interesting thing to monitor because I think signing-wise, I do like what they've done.
I like what Nottingham Forest have done as well.
Yeah.
They've added a lot of players that have decent experience in the Bundesliga, elsewhere in the Premier League, solid professionals. Southampton made a couple of good signings. Romeo Lavia's looked really good in holding midfield. He was the heir to Fernandinho, but Man City have let him go after they signed Calvin Phillips. So really promising young Belgian midfielder. And Joe Aribo from Rangers was so good in their run to the Europa League final. He is looking pretty good for Saints in pre-season too. And looking down a bit, I mean, West Ham made a couple of guards come in at centre-back, which they needed. Probably need a few more attacking pieces, which they're working on late in pre-season with Armando Broja and Jesse Lingard potentially come in. I think that'd be huge for them. And Wolves bringing in Nathan Collins from Burnley is another solid pickup there. Yeah. So rounding up around the league there, a lot of deals that maybe we haven't spoke about that much. I think there's going to be a few more as well. The window's obviously open until September. But right now, a lot of teams, which I think is very, very good if you're a manager and a fan of these teams, they've got players in early, right? They're playing preseason games. They're bedding them into the philosophy of the team and of the club, and that's so helpful. So pretty much from 10th downwards, I don't really know where these weaker teams are. Maybe the newly promoted teams coming up still need to do a bit more work in the transfer window. But aside from that, it really is pretty even across the Premier League outside of the top 6 or 7 teams. So over at Pro Soccer Talk on NBCSports.com, we'll keep you updated with all the latest transfer news from across the summer. It's heating up. So far, it's been a really, really busy summer, but I feel like we've still got quite a few moves to happen, lads, in the weeks to come. Okay, let's focus now on the US men's national team transfer news and focus on which US players are on the move. We've got a lot of updates here because there's been a flurry of transfer activity for US players. There's plenty are on the move, right, with the World Cup just a few months away. That's in the back of their mind. I mean, we're looking now at the players that have already moved on this summer, gents. I mean, we've got Aronson and Tyler Adams to Leeds. Matt Turner completed his move to Arsenal. Carter Vickers went to Celtic on a permanent deal. Jordan Pefok went to Union Berlin. Horvath went on loan to Luton Town. Luca de la Torre to Celta Vigo. And then just as we're filming, just before this, Zach Steffen completed his loan move from Man City to Middlesbrough. And Shaq Moore went to Tenerife to Nashville back to MLS. So, Nick, give me a breather here. What do you think of those moves? Because there's plenty of them. And there's a lot of jostling right now amongst the US players and hopefuls to make sure they're on the plane to Qatar and in Greg Berhalter's squad.
I've got to be very careful to just not steal all of the thunder from Andy because you could literally name all of the most of these transfers, I should say, as someone you love. I love the idea, the reports of Matt Turner going on loan. We could have 2 USMNT goalkeepers on loan in the championship, which I think is a good place to earn your medal ahead of a World Cup. The Luca de la Torre signing, I think we shouldn't spend too much time on it, if only because it's hard to talk about Celta Vigo, right? I don't have a ton of the familiarity with their pieces, but I love the idea of him going to that team. But the ones I think it's just going to be the easiest to focus on are Pivok and Richards. We need answers at those positions. Chris Richards even being Premier League average at that position makes me feel like we're pretty set at center back because Walker Zimmerman's more the safe guy. Richards, Andy did a great job of laying out why Richards is the ideal player. The way he progresses the ball, the way he picks his spots. I mean, the numbers that Andy had in there. If you thought you liked Chris Richards, you're going to love Chris Richards from that. And then PFOC at Union Berlin. Look, we've seen so many times over the past few years. Yes, scoring at the Premier League is the kind of beacon for us. But if you're looking at international football, a good bellwether, a good place to start your measuring is, can you score in the Bundesliga? Can you beat down a league that is known for also being physical at center back, but also requiring a little bit of a nous, I believe is how you say it over there, at navigating that area. And if PFOC can get the job done at Union Berlin, I mean, I would go as far as to say, barring us seeing something crazy happening from Pepe or somewhere else, if you can get that job and be an informed striker in the Bundesliga, you might be starting the first day of the World Cup for the United States of America.
Absolutely. And of course, we didn't mention Chris Richards to start with, but you mentioned him there.
Oh, yes.
And he has been linked with a move to Crystal Palace. Bayern Munich have confirmed that they're in talks with Palace. At the time of filming, he looks like he's going to go there. So, Andy, you wrote a great piece on PST saying why it's a good idea. Do you think if Richards goes to Palace that he can be a starter? Because, I mean, Anderson and Mark Gahey had a really good partnership there last season. That'd be kind of tough to break into. But Richards has shown he's very versatile if he plays at right back or older midfield. So I'm just a little bit skeptical if that is the right place for him, if he needs to play at centre back ahead of the World Cup to prep for that. But for me, he's still the first choice alongside Walker Zimmerman for the USA starting lineup in the World Cup. So what do you think about that move and Chris Richards in particular to Palace?
Yeah, it's interesting that Nick said if you thought you liked Chris Richards, you'll really like Chris Richards now. So I went into it unsure about Chris Richards because all we've seen, or all I've seen, I'll speak for me, really is his performances for the U.S. men's national team. I don't watch a ton of Hoffenheim, where he's been on loan the last 18 months from Bayern Munich. And so I wasn't completely sure, like, what's all the hype about this guy? I see in theory what he does well and how it could translate and how the U.S. men's national team could use that. But I hadn't seen it really applied in the way that we had wanted to see for the national team. And so I looked at some of the club numbers, and I was really, really surprised with how high he ranked among center backs across Europe's top 5 leagues over the last 365 days. He's in the 80th plus percentile in a lot of passing numbers, and it's not just short passing. A lot of it's in the middle third and the attacking third as a center back as well. His ball progression in areas of the field where he's really contributing to the attack, to the buildup of play. It's not just passing it sideways to his partner or back to the goalkeeper. He's pretty proactive as a defender. A lot of pressures on the ball, a lot of pressures in, again, the middle third and the attacking third, where going to Crystal Palace, Patrick Vieira wants to have the ball. He wants to win the ball back. And so it does feel like this is probably, whether it was Vieira himself or he was shown, Chris Richards' tape and his work or the numbers, and that Patrick Vieira must have said, I like what I see there. There's a lot to work with, I think, in the system that Crystal Palace played last season. And we should also remember that was just Vieira's first season as well. They changed over about half the team. It looks like they're trying to change over the other half of the team this summer. And so if Richards is identified as someone that Vieira truly wants in one of those roles, whatever it is, I think it's a good move because the quality that he will face for 38 games this season is going to really be a step up. I think it'll probably be about the same competition for places in the team as he saw at Hoffenheim, but the competition over 38 games is going to be something really different. So if he's able to get any sort of game time between now and the World Cup and just kind of acclimate and stabilize himself in that situation, I think it's good for the U.S. men's national team. Obviously, there's a possibility that it doesn't work out so well. I think we have to factor that in as well. It makes it a little bit risky. But one other stat here real quick, 99th percentile, Chris Richards, progressing the ball under pressure. That is so important when you're talking about a center back in the Premier League, because what is it? It's a high pressing, high intensity, very quick game, and center backs are under a lot of pressure on the ball. Chris Richards is comfortable with that. Chris Richards is used to that. And so I came away cautiously excited about Chris Richards to Crystal Palace and what it could mean for the national team.
Well, that's pretty exciting for the rest of us if Andy's cautiously excited. So that's decent. I think you brought it up there about Palace and Vieira's philosophy and playing style. You just have to look at the other young players that he's developed over the last 12 months. I mean, Conor Gallagher was on loan from Chelsea. What a wonderful job he did nurturing his talent. Tariq Mitchell, obviously, left back, called up to the England squad. Mark Gahey, exactly the same, got called up to the England squad and developed. And so, some of the other younger attacking talents like Michael Olise as well. So he is very keen to work with young players, take their game to the next level. That's Palace's philosophy. So there are a lot of worse places that Chris Richards could go to in the Premier League. Even if he isn't playing regularly to start with, I think he'll get enough opportunities to stake his claim. And yeah, Palace are very flexible tactically. I don't think it's the end of the world if Chris Richards comes in and plays a holding midfielder or as a right wing back or something like that for Palace. If he's playing regularly in the Premier League, he can still pretty much slot back into the centre-back position for the US and feel pretty comfortable. So I like that move. I like Zach Steffen to Middlesbrough as well. We've all been harping on about he needs to play regularly for probably the last, 2 seasons now. He's done okay for Man City for the most part, apart from that FA Cup semi-final mistake, whenever he's been called upon. But he needed this in his development. And he's 27 years of age now. He needs to go and play somewhere regularly. And Middlesbrough, watched a lot of them on their cup runs and their push for promotion from the Championship last season. Chris Wilder, we know he loves to play out from the back, fluid kind of 3-5-2 system. A lot of that depends on the goalkeeper being good with his feet. Steffen is that. It'll be a battle for him and a challenge in the Championship, something that he probably hasn't faced in terms of his career so far. But I really like this, that he's going to be primed and ready and probably have at least 20-odd games under his belt by the time the World Cup runs around. And I think this has made him my definite number one if Matt Turner doesn't go out on loan and he just sticks around at Arsenal. This is why Steffen's made this move to get ahead of Turner. I really like it. I think it's a good fit. I think Middlesbrough are going to be right at the top of the Championship. So makes sense on so many levels. And hey, it's going to struggle to usurp Ederson, right, in the future. So if he doesn't get rid of Middlesbrough, then it's not a bad place for him to play for the next few years of his career, and then maybe make that step up to a top team in England, Germany, wherever. But I really like that move for Steffen. Nick, jump in, because I know he's goalkeeper and striker and centre-back. Those are the 3 positions, right, where the US really needs players who are making these moves to make a step up. But there's a big element of risk as well. Andy mentioned it too.
Yeah, but look no further than the last time that Chris Wilder nurtured a goalkeeper. We saw Dean Henderson go on loan from Manchester United when I believe it was team of the season in League One and the Championship. And granted, it took some time. He didn't really ever edge out David De Gea, which, by the way, happens. He's phenomenal. But the profile was raised to the point where for 2 straight seasons, whether it's been Newcastle or another club, the interest in acquiring a player like that has happened. And you need that as a goalkeeper. That's the one thing that Steffen will need, Matt Turner will need as well. If it doesn't work out at that current spot, teams want to see that you've been a star at that level. It's why Ethan Horvath can get a move. It's why these other players can. And again, the World Cup matters to me. And these guys are moving because they'll have a chance to get that number 1 shirt. But also, this is also about the long term. And, you never know what happens with Ederson. You never know what happens if Pep was to leave Man City and an entirely different kind of goalkeeper is required. So, Andy and I have had conversations about keepers before, so I don't know what you want to toss into the mix, but I think this is very good.
Yeah, the more I think about these 6 months or so leading up to the World Cup and where players in, kind of questionable situations are, the more I think the more I'm less worried about kind of the tier or the level of club that they go to, but I want them somewhere where they're going to face pressure. And going to Middlesbrough, the pressure to get to the Premier League, the expectation almost after slowly building the last couple of years to get to the Premier League, I think is going to be really good for Zach Steffen, because he can go play all the cup games, or he could play for a mid-table Championship team. And we can say, the Championship, that's a good place, to do your work. And it is. But then you're thrown into the World Cup. What is the World Cup? It is pressure. It is pressure of the entire world watching you. And so I just think from the mindset perspective, having the mentality, being comfortable in that pressure-packed situation, Zach Steffen, come November, assuming that he stays healthy through the first half of the season, I think he's going to be in a really good spot to, as Joe said, be the number 1 for the national team.
By the way, it's 4 months until the World Cup kicks off, essentially. So there is not much time for these US players to stake their claim at their new clubs, but it's certainly very interesting and very exciting to see a lot of them moving. Obviously, with that in mind, to be in the starting lineup when the World Cup rolls around. And it's risky, but it can work out for the better in a lot of their cases. Focusing on Christian Pulisic and his future, obviously there's been a lot of talk about in this summer, guys, leaving Chelsea potentially. Is he surplus to requirements with the likes of Raheem Sterling being signed, who we think is going to play in exactly the same position as him? Some really interesting updates from Pulisic himself. We haven't heard from him all summer. We've seen lots of reports in the tabloids and elsewhere that Juventus have been interested, other teams have been inquiring, and Chelsea may look to move him on. But Pulisic's basically saying, you know what, I'm fine here. I'm happy with competing with Raheem Sterling and others for my position. That's always been the same at Chelsea. That's what happens when you're at a big club like this. What do you think about that kind of statement, Nick? Do you like that from Pulisic, or is there a danger here that the USA star player ahead of the World Cup maybe having a very small role at Chelsea? Yes, it's a big club, but he may be a bit rusty going into the World Cup in Qatar. You worried about that, or are you happy that he's ready to throw down the gauntlet to the other Chelsea players and say, you know what, I'm going to battle you for a starting spot in the Premier League and the Champions League?
Geez, that's a loaded question. I'll tell you why, because the ramifications here are, look, he's going to be fine for the U.S., and I hate to say it this way, but I'm thinking to myself, I'm going to get a potentially, in the worst case scenario here, rested and ornery and healthy Christian Pulisic, who's going to then go play against England, and at a World Cup. I'm kind of okay with the worst case scenario here. What have we said? I believe it was Joe coined it the first time. Angry Pulisic is the good Pulisic. This guy looks like he's ready to chew off somebody's arm or something. Like, he's very, very angry. And I think it's more likely that he looks at Chelsea's schedule in a World Cup year, this unorthodox World Cup calendar, knows there are going to be games. He's going to play enough. He also knows, because he's not, borrow a word from Jay-Z, I'm not a businessman, I'm a businessman. This is a life and career affirming winter for him in the United States of America. He is going every World Cup moving forward in the United States, especially with a US one about to be hosted, is going to be the most adored and watched and scrutinized World Cup for US soccer as a program. And so I think this guy looks at himself and has looked at himself as someone who can be transformational in the way that, forget Clint Dempsey or Landon Donovan, but how Mia Hamm was, how taking a program to the forefront. And I don't really see a situation outside of injury in which this guy isn't either a buzzing as a Chelsea player and in his best form, or angry and taking it to the next level. So I know I kind of went on for a while there, guys, but do you understand what I'm getting at?
I do. And he mentioned it as well in his interview with Herc Gomez from ESPN, which was really good. And he basically talked about that mantle of wanting to grow the game in the US and be the guy that puts the team on his back and make popularity grow for the sport in the States, but through his performances for the US national team, and how important that is to him to be the leader, to play well for the US, and for that team to do something at this World Cup this winter. So with that in mind, Andy, I'm just thinking, like Nick said, there's a good point. He could be rested, could be angry, upset, and angry Pulisic is a good Pulisic in my book. But does he need to go somewhere and be the main man? We've talked about that a lot, right? If an Everton comes in late in the window and makes a loan offer for him and says, you're going to play week in, week out under Frank Lampard, who, by the way, has been talking very positively about Pulisic this summer on Everton's tour of the US.
Took him long enough.
Yeah, so, but he did play well. He probably had his best spell of his Chelsea career under Lampard during Project Restart. So I'm torn with this. I'm literally flip of a coin. It seems like maybe Pulisic's flip of a coin, maybe even Chelsea are, about whether he should stay or should he go. So that famous Clash song, should he stay or should he go, Andy?
Yeah. Final answer for me on Pulisic, I think for the summer transfer window, he needs to stay where he is. And the more I've thought about it, the pressure situation at Chelsea, I like the pressure to win a place, to compete against Raheem Sterling, I think will be good for him. I think also the opportunity to not have to play every single game. We might almost, as Nick said, we might almost see that as a blessing in disguise come World Cup time. And not just from a national team perspective, but I think probably from all players' perspectives. I think there's going to be so many games and there are going to be so many minutes on those legs that some guys are not going to be feeling so great going to the World Cup. So that could be an okay situation for him, unless a big giant club comes to him and says, we want to build it around you. He's got to stay where he is because he's already comfortable there. He's already acclimated. when you said 4 months, Joe, it blew my mind. 4 months. If you're talking about moving club, moving house, moving your life, uprooting everything that you've had for the last 2 or 3 years, trying to find a new situation. Oh, and by the way, on top of that, immediately play the very best football that you can. That's not realistic. That's not happening. And so if he didn't get a move last summer or in January, it probably wasn't as likely to happen this summer as some of the reports and rumors led people to believe, because it doesn't sound like there was ever an offer. It doesn't sound like there was ever much discussion with anyone, with any other clubs or between Pulisic and Chelsea. It almost sounds like it was a moot point from the start. And, it's gotten some content out of it and everything. But I think at this point, Pulisic at Chelsea this season is the best spot for him and the national team.
I think that's great to say right now, Andy, but let's reassess this situation after, a couple of weeks in August. When we get towards the end of August, the end of the transfer window. If he's not playing at all, because look at the players he has to get ahead of now. Sterling, Mount, Ziyech, Werner, Hudson-Odoi, if he's fit and healthy. I still think he's probably a starter, or if not the next man off the bench in that situation. But I feel there's going to be a lot of uproar amongst the US fans if Pulisic isn't playing. But like you said, he's got to know the best for his future, and there's got to be a spot for him to go. And I don't think there's a Barcelona or a Juventus or a Bayern Munich that really wants to make him the man and promise him regular football. So that's the only issue I have right now. So
I'll be very short to wrap this up. If he can't get enough minutes to benefit himself in the national team between now and the World Cup against that competition, as good as they are, no slight against them, and this is also no slight against him, then he's not the player that we hoped that he would be. That is the type of player that we hoped he would be. And so that's who he needs to be competing with, beating out 4 minutes and outperforming on the field. It's simply, at the end of the day, we can have all these conversations. What he does on the field is what's going to matter. And so if he cannot beat that competition out to get minutes, then he's probably not a Chelsea caliber player. He's not a top club in the world caliber player. I think it's about that simple.
And he's still very young, of course. That's the thing we have to remember here. He's maturing a lot as well and grown up a lot, as he's spoken about. But for the last point for me on this, Thomas Tuchel was there to stay at Chelsea. And for whatever reason, it seems like he just has this idea that Pulisic is a substitute and an impact player. He's told me that himself when I asked and said, maybe I've been a bit too harsh on him because that's just how I saw him. Maybe when he was his coach at Dortmund growing up, he's this young up-and-coming kid. And there needs to be more trust, I think, from Thomas Tuchel that Pulisic can perform, because he's done it on the big stage in the Champions League run, scored big goals. He just needs to add that clinical nature to his game. But he is young, and this is a big few months, I think, for him, not just ahead of the World Cup, but for his Chelsea and sort of Premier League future at the top level of European soccer. But gents, we'll keep everyone updated, right, with all the latest USMNT transfer news, all the news heading up towards the World Cup. We've got lots of special shows planned for you here on Pro Soccer Talk. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to keep us very busy over the next few months, because there's a lot of movement with those US players, which we have been focusing on specifically for many, many years. So, gents, all left for me to say is thanks so much for joining me for PST this week. Thanks, everyone, for watching, and we'll speak to you all very soon indeed. Cheers, guys.
Hi there, I'm Rebecca Lowe, studio host for NBC's coverage of the Premier League. Don't forget to hit subscribe to watch highlights all season long, and be sure to tune in for Premier League mornings every weekend at 7 a.m. Eastern. And for even more content, head over to Peacock, where we've got live games, original series, and a dedicated round-the-clock Premier League channel featuring studio shows, classic matches, and much more.